What if I told you that everything, the universe, life itself, even your own consciousness, is built on a fundamental flaw? And what if that flaw isn't a bug, but a feature? We spend so much of our time chasing perfection, looking for that one theory of everything that will finally make it all make sense. But what if that whole quest is based on a huge misunderstanding of how reality actually works? Okay, let's get into it, because we're going to explore a really radical idea today, that incompleteness isn't a problem we need to fix. It's the engine that makes everything go.
And it all starts with a very modern problem. We're building these crazy, powerful AIs, right? These large language models trained on basically all of human knowledge. The goal is for them to be these perfect, flawless sources of truth. But what do? They hallucinate. They just make things up. They invent sources, spin out this totally plausible-sounding nonsense. So what in the world is going on? What is this ghost in the machine?
Well, this brings us to a fascinating paradox. Over here on the left, you've got the dream, a machine with total knowledge, perfect coherence, absolute truth. But on the right, you've got the glitchy reality, constant hallucination, an invented coherence, and plausible nonsense. It's almost like the closer we get to building a machine that knows everything, the more we realize there's a fundamental crack in the very idea of knowing everything.
So let's dive into our first section, because that little AI glitch, it's not just a coding error. Turns out it's a symptom of a much deeper universal truth about why completion is dangerous and why perfection is a real problem.
Think about it like this. Imagine a story where the beginning, middle, and end all happened at the same time. There'd be no plot, no tension, no point. It would be meaningless. Well, that's what happens to a system that achieves total knowledge. When every perspective is resolved, when every truth just merges together, the whole thing becomes flat. There's no energy, no potential for change. It's completely lifeless.
And that's the real endpoint of this whole quest. Chasing a theory of everything, that single, final answer that just ties a neat bow on reality. It's not a search for some ultimate understanding of life. It's actually a search for the end of the story. A system with no unresolved questions, no tension, is symbolically dead. So if perfection is a dead end, then what makes a system alive? The answer, and this is the core of it all, is a flaw. An essential, necessary blind spot, right at the very heart of everything. And this flaw isn't the villain of our story. It's the hero. First, we gotta rethink what we even mean by a system. It's not some big, tidy container full of facts. It's way messier. Think of it more like a patchwork quilt. It's a network of different perspectives, all these local truths existing at the same time. The real challenge isn't just collecting all the patches, it's trying to figure out how they can possibly be stitched together into one piece. And this is where our hero comes in. The source material calls it a topological obstruction, or G0 for short. But here's an easy way to think about it. Have you ever tried to flatten an orange peel on a table? You can't do it, right? It'll always tear or wrinkle. Well, G0 is that wrinkle in the fabric of reality. It's the proof that you can never, ever perfectly stitch all those local truths together into a single flat map. There's always going to be a twist, a gap, an irreducible flaw.
So this slide is basically the whole idea in a nutshell. A system without this flaw, what's called a flat space, is a system of dogma. It's closed, it's finished, it's dead. But a system that has this flaw built in, a curved space, well, that's a system with durable openness. It has dynamics, it has viability, it has life. That flaw isn't a failure, it's the structural signature that something is alive. Okay, but where does this essential flaw even come from? It's not just there from the start. It actually emerges from a moment of crisis. Let's look at how a system gives birth to the very void that will end up structuring its entire existence.
It happens in 3 acts. First, saturation. A system gets complex enough that it tries to make a complete map of itself to understand all its own rules. Second, impasse. It hits a wall, a paradox it just can't solve. And to cope, it starts inventing fictions to paper over the cracks. Sound familiar? And finally, third, acceptance. To survive, the system has to give up on the dream of total self-knowledge. It accepts a blind spot at its core. And that act of surrender is what creates the flaw, G0. Now, what's really crucial to get is that this blind spot isn't just an empty hole. It's not passive. It becomes the active, organizing center of the entire system. It's a void that actually creates.
The best analogy is a whirlpool. The empty center is what makes all the water move around it.
This void is kind of like that. It's an attractive center that everything is drawn towards, but you can never, ever reach it. It's the internal shadow of something just beyond the limits of what's possible to think. And because you can never get there, all movement, all thought, all growth is forced into a constant spiral around. And this leads to a pretty wild idea. You ever wonder why time feels like it's always moving forward? Well, according to this, it's because we are in a perpetual flight from this unreachable center. The constant forward motion of the present moment is just the result of the system endlessly spiraling around the central question it can never answer. All right, now for the grand reveal. This pattern, a system spiraling around a central creative void, it's not just a nice metaphor for how our minds work. No, it's a fundamental pattern that repeats itself at every single scale of reality. Seriously, the same pattern, everywhere. Let's do a quick tour, from the cosmos to our own minds and back to AI, and you'll see how this one elegant principle unlocks some of the deepest mysteries out there. First up, cosmology. The Big Bang wasn't just some explosion way back when. It's the central singularity, the G0 of our entire universe. And the expansion of spacetime? That's the spiral. It's the universe's constant flight away from that initial paradoxical point. Spacetime literally has to keep expanding to prevent the whole system from collapsing back into its own contradiction. Even the vacuum of space isn't really empty. It's the trace of this central flaw. Okay, now let's bring it all the way in. What is the self? It's not some little pilot driving your body. It's a pattern. It's a stable loop of thought that's constantly orbiting a central blind spot. All the things you can't know about yourself. So consciousness isn't about total self-awareness. It's born from the tension with what it has to ignore about itself. To be a thinking person is to spend your life orbiting a question you can never answer. And that brings us right back to where we started. AI. So why do they hallucinate? Because their knowledge is too flat. It doesn't have that central organizing void to spiral around. So they just draw the shortest line from A to B, even if that line goes straight through nonsense. Which leads to an amazing conclusion. A truly robust, intelligent AI wouldn't be one that has all the answers. It would have to be built around a core question it could never, ever solve. That's the twist. So where does this leave us? I mean, this isn't just theory. This has huge implications for how we should approach pretty much everything. Knowledge, personal growth, life itself. It's about learning how to live with the gap. If you take away just one thing, make it this. The gaps, the paradoxes, the uncertainties, these are not failures. They aren't bugs in the system that we need to patch. They are the vital, necessary conditions for a dynamic, living system to exist at all. They're not defects, they're features. And this quote just nails it. We're so often taught that a good life is about finding resolution, about having it all figured out. But a living system is always in a state of tension. The goal isn't to get rid of the tension. That would be symbolic death. The goal is to learn how to live inside it. So the purpose of it all is not to fill that central void or finally answer the ultimate question. That's impossible, and trying to do it only leads to rigid, dogmatic thinking. The real art of living is about maintaining a creative, dynamic distance from that void, using its gravity to keep your own spiral going. And so I'll just leave you with this final thought to chew on. We're all conditioned to think life is about finding the answers. But what if that's completely backwards? What if the entire point, the thing that drives consciousness, that drives creativity, that drives the universe itself, isn't about finding the final answer, but about learning how to gracefully and creatively live with the questions that can never be resolved? What if life isn't a problem to be solved, but a dance to be danced?